Welcome. It has just gone 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Wednesday the 2nd of November, and you are watching episode 66 of Regional Wrap. Regional Wrap, providing an insight on the issues affecting regional Australia and giving a voice to regional residents. My name is Bill Bates, and joining me on this episode, Renewables, Restoring Reason, is my guest, philosopher, author, and scientist, Rafe Champion. Rafe will be joined by his friend Bill Stinson, who he will introduce a little bit later. But Rafe grew up on a dairy farm near Irishtown in northwest Tasmania. He initially trained in agriculture science, studying at the Adelaide University, at University of Tasmania, Hobart, then went to the University of Adelaide for postgraduate study before moving to Sydney. The intention was to work for the Food and Agricultural Organisation or some such body to address the problem of world hunger. However, it became apparent to Rafe that the problem of world hunger was not really a problem of food production, and his focus turned to sociology. Rafe later studied sociology, public policy and administration at Macquarie University, and was engaged in public policy and planning with the New South Wales Department of Health for more than a decade. He has written a number of non-fiction books, two of them in collaboration with Ruth Park. The two collaborations are Ruth Park's Sydney, a guidebook, and Home Before Dark, a biography of Australian boxer Les Darcy. Rafe has also written a book of collected essays and reviews related to the influential philosopher Karl Popper, and a handbook on real estate law. He is also a regular contributor to both Spectator and Quadrant magazines. Welcome, Rafe, and if you'd like to introduce your friend Bill.
Yeah, well, I'm delighted to introduce Bill. He's my right-hand man in reaching out to the regional communities who are concerned about the depredation of wind and solar. He's a particularly helpful colleague, being a project manager by profession, and this brings a bit of organisation and system into my more chaotic modus operandi. So he's a great addition to our team of the Energy Realists of Australia. There's over a dozen of us, mostly retired engineers, and I think we've been doing a great job putting out briefing notes for politicians and journalists on all aspects of the debacle of climate science and net zero. So I'm great to have Bill with me as to share the burden, and with the rich insights that he's got into the particular environmental impact of the wind and solar industries.
If I could just start with you, Rafe, in regards to, if you can just fill in some of the detail between your life on the farm, what took you on the course you initially did. And it was interesting that you changed your course because you realised that food production wasn't the problem in regards to world hunger. And I suppose we've seen some of that evidence today in, I think it's Somalia, and there's a big famine there, and they're asking for more money in regards to compensating for climate change, yet they completely ignore the geopolitical problems that area has.
Well, the aid to the third world has been a travesty for several decades. There's a great economist, Lord Peter Bauer, who made a career out of studying the way that Western aid to the third world, by and large, did more harm than good. It did harm because it mostly went into the pockets of the corrupt leaders who imposed regulations and state controls on the peasant farmers. The peasant farmers, for example, built a whole rubber industry in Malaysia without any state intervention, and they did by spontaneous growth of peasant entrepreneurs, they built rural industries But then after World War II, central control and socialism was the order of the day. So the new governments that took over after colonial rule promptly introduced marketing boards to try and control the price of food in the city. And if they controlled it too strictly, the peasants stopped growing it because it wasn't worthwhile taking it to market. So that's just an example of where misplaced socialism wrecks economies. And then the rich countries were supposed to save them by sending billions, tens of billions, hundreds of billions of dollars over the years. It was almost completely wasted. The sole exception to the waste of this aid was actually hands-on medical service, that actually did some good on the ground, but the rest of it was just waste.
I think we see that in our near Pacific neighbours as well. There's sort of a large argument in regards to maybe the funding should be more in intangible deliveries rather than cash. So that's got to be a long sort of term argument, I suppose.
Well, you want to buy stuff that the people actually produce in a more or less free market system. You don't want them dragooned into state cooperatives or controlled by marketing boards, and you don't want a lot of money going into the hands of corrupt governments and bureaucrats. Corrupt and incompetent.
Well, I suppose the other thing, one of the biggest things that highlighted in the last 12 months or so was the government's making rash decisions for intervention to people's lives in farming. And that was in Sri Lanka, where a government just made an arbitrary decision to go organic, and from a country that was sort of had a surplus of food and actually selling it on the open market, it's actually in a dire straits now. So that's the extent of where government interference can cause extreme problems.
Well, it's a textbook case, but there's been no end of those cases. The Ukraine was one of the worst. The Russian communists took over. They decided they wanted to collectivise the small farmers. The small farmers were very productive, but they were private enterprise, so that they were literally starved to death. Probably 5 million were deliberately starved. And then they collectivised the land, and it went from being a food bowl to barely subsistence. Congratulations.
Well, just make the comment, they're doing the same thing in the Netherlands at the moment.
Yeah, precisely.
But I think the Netherlands actually got a more obscure problem in regards to the EU wants to sort of turn Holland or Netherlands into a major sort of just a huge city for their sort of the bureaucracy that you're required to run Europe on a greater scale. And it looks like actually the whole of the Netherlands is going to be sacrificed to deliver that greater city. It's a real strange situation where a country's giving up its sovereignty to afford the EU the opportunity to do something.
Well, that just beggars description. I know that they're trying to get the farmers off the land, ostensibly to reduce the problem of excessive use of nitrogenous fertilisers. But that's a nonsense as well.
If we could just now give an introduction to Bill and his background.
Yeah, well, Bill is a project manager from the building industry, and he's he's experienced in project management, but he's got a particular interest in the environmental impact of wind and solar.
You want me to go, mate?
Take it away.
Yeah, give us a bit of detail about your mischievous childhood and your direction into the field you went into.
Is this MA 15 plus? No, well, I grew up in North Sydney, but my family settled in Wellington, New South Wales in 1844, and my great-grandfather moved down to Sydney in about 1900 because of the Federation drought So I've always had an interest in the country. But the other thing is my professional background in Bachelor of Applied Science in Building. I've been involved in many large projects. One behind me is at Circular Quay in Sydney, a 50-storey office building. And I did some work out at the International Airport Mascot, a $264 million extension. That was in my earlier life. Today I'm, I would say, semi-retired. I still have my own consulting business and keep myself out of mischief that way. But I became very interested. Well, I suppose there's two types of environment. There's the built environment, which is what we create. And then there's the natural environment. The natural environment comprises all our forests, all our flora, fauna. And these are the sort of things that we need to protect, not only for ourselves, but for our children, our great-grandchildren. So I became interested in what was happening as far as, well, first of all, the hoax of climate change, what people are doing to poor old carbon dioxide. We don't have carbon dioxide, well, none of us are here. So this great hoax, the Y2K bug didn't work too well for them, so then they started with the carbon dioxide hoax. And then they moved to, we need to have these renewables, the monstrosities of wind turbines and solar farms to provide electricity, which they will never do. And when I started looking at that, I looked at the life cycle of wind turbines, the life cycle of solar panels from where they started. And that meant because there's so many more resources that are required in terms of metals and glass, etc. They have to go into areas that have never been mined before, areas of biodiversity, and these would then have to be dug up. Then they process the metals, then they take them into the manufacturing area, and then they transport them, install them. And when you look at the amount of energy that's used and the amount of carbon dioxide that they say that they don't want to produce, it's really eye-opening. And I suppose one of the other things too, that the provision of energy is required on an affordable basis, a dispatchable basis. And also, it's got to be able to be provided to our industries affordably. And what's happening? The price of energy is going through the roof in Australia. It's crazy that Australia has the best coal in the world. We're importing our best coal. It's virtually no ash. And also, we have uranium. Australia is the only G20 country that has a prohibition on nuclear energy. Now, in Canada, 4 of the provinces have done a feasibility study on small modular reactors, and those provinces are similar to the Australian states. The politicians over there are supporting them, and these small modular reactors, they can repurpose coal-fired power stations by taking out the coal-fired boilers at the end of their lives and replacing them with small modular reactors. So just a quick overview. I'm very interested in organising people in the regions. We have started this particular, what we call the National Information Network. And through our emails, we're starting to gather community organisations, those country organisations, and we've set up a hub where we can provide information to these hubs that are then sent out to other smaller protesting groups. In New South Wales, there's one that's centred in Gulgong called Save Our Surroundings, and they have access to 30 community groups. And what we're doing is providing them with information. We are providing submissions to various government inquiries. One of them at the moment is the submissions close on 30th November, and they're looking into the transitioning of Australia to become a green energy superpower. Now, it's like a Yes Minister thing. I mean, you couldn't dream this up. These people are crazy. Bowen needs to be put in a straitjacket. I mean, he is an absolute lunatic. So what we've got to do collectively, this is what we're starting to push, is to educate people in the cities, to let them know that the country is being destroyed. There's prime agricultural land that's being taken for solar farms, and these solar panels are manufactured by forced labour in China. And because they only last for 20 years, so what happens in 20 years' time? Everybody's talking about China invading Taiwan, and that would mean that we'd have to support the United States because they want to defend Taiwan. So where do the solar panels come from? Where do the wind turbines come from? I mean, you couldn't dream this thing up. The politicians that we have in this country are absolutely abysmal. There's no leadership, and what we've got to do is to get people to start writing to these politicians, telling them to pull their bloody fingers out and to put a plan in place for Australia where we can have clean, affordable energy using our abundance of coal and abundance of uranium. So is that enough, Bill, as a start?
That's fine. And this is where I want to approach the next part of the program in regards to Raf's change from agriculture to sociological interest. And maybe he can give us a bit of insight how we can, you've just talked about re-educating or educating people in the city. Good luck to you. I think a lot of them are too far gone. And I'll just show a screen now of the people you have to also deal with. All right, you would expect the politicians and business people to be a bit more open to suggestion, but they don't seem capable of it. But how do you deal with these people? And then I'll put them up now. Now, these people are, in your experience of dealing with people and that, Raf, how do you think you can actually deal with these people and show him some information, logical information, and get them to sort of moderate their behaviour? Or do these sort of people have to go through the stage of actually living in the dark, having no electricity, having no food, to realise the folly of their ways? And that's just the protesters against the coal loaders and the coal trains. And then you've got the other activists who go to the extent to interfering with everyday life, like blocking the roads that delay ambulance getting sick people to hospital, blocking intersections by gluing their hands to the roads. And then you also have vandalism of artwork, but at least fortunately for a lot of the masterpieces and that, they've already taken protection against these sort of incidents. But you've got to worry about the lesser valued pieces of art that probably aren't afforded this degree of protection. So do you think you can actually deal with that class of people, or do you just have to concentrate on the intellectuals, the bureaucrats and the politicians?
Well, I want to aim for just basically normal people, and this is my philosophy in the climate and energy war at large. Our aim is to get to people who haven't completely made up their minds, because once people have locked into a view, that's probably the end of it. I don't want to waste time arguing with people who aren't listening and aren't prepared to change their minds. So I want to minimise time spent doing that, and also want to minimise the time spent in furious agreement with people who agree. I want to be like Bill and get out there and find every way that we can to spread the message wider. Now, as for the young people, I've thought about this running up to the show, and I realise that we have a major problem of school education. It's a problem of indoctrination, blatant indoctrination, and it's a problem of the uniform or the standard curriculum, where every issue, every subject has to be seen through a lens or four lenses. There's a lens of environmentalism, the lens of racism, the lens of colonialisation, and I can't remember the other one, but they're all crazy distortions. And so there really needs to be serious revision at the school level. But one thing that could be done in a half-decent general curriculum would be to actually use good audio-visual material to show people farm life. Like, I don't know if anybody goes to the big annual shows anymore, but I know we took our kids along and they got to pat a sheep and they saw the cattle parading, but that really doesn't cut it in terms of introducing people to what rural life is about. So really and truly, in school, they should learn about the contribution of agriculture and mining to the economy of the nation. They should be taught that mining makes a negligible impact on the environment, particularly given the remediation they're required to do. And you can compare that with the depredation of wind and solar, where the degree of remediation, as far as I know, doesn't exist. And basically, kids could be given a good introduction to the things that they need to know about the economic facts of life regarding farming and mining. They could be introduced to the environmental aspects that good farmers nurture the land. Good farmers don't wreck their land. They know how to use it. We've got better at it over 200 years, fortunately. And the other thing they can learn is just to get some insight into the way that country people live. Years ago, lots of people in the cities had relatives in the country and they took holidays there. Well, they don't do that anymore. They just go and stay for a weekend someplace. But a lot can be done through half-decent public school education.
I think one of the other problem with the education system is too, I mean, although the Constitution put education in the realm of the states under their control and left it there, but at what's happened over the years with the financials of the federal government being the collector of nearly 95% of all revenue, it has coerced the states into this national curriculum where when we were educated, I was educated in West Australia, we had a completely different system from the eastern states. We only had 12 years of school. We had 7 primary, 5 in secondary school, 3 junior high, 2 senior high. Victoria had something different, and there was all different variations. But the state was responsible for its own education curriculum and outcomes. But the model we got now is it's all been centralised and it's dumbed down to the worst standard you probably could ever get of all those different state values.
You've hit the nail on the head there, Bill. Don't get me started. No, what should happen in Canberra is that the Minister for Education should have a clerk who every year writes out 6 cheques and dispatches them to the treasurers of the states, and that's it. But instead, we now have a Commonwealth Department of Education with thousands of people in it, and
no schools to run.
They don't run schools, but the same applies in health. There's a federal Department of Health also with thousands of people, and one of their main tasks is to waste their time and the time of officers in the states having consultations with each other. I mean, I've been involved in that in my role in the State Health Department, and you can just see the frittering away of time, the procrastination, the dithering, and then settling on, as you say, the lowest common denomination of policies to spread across the country. It's really quite catastrophic. And then, of course, on top of that, the icing on the cake is the blatant left-wing indoctrination. I mean, it'd be bad enough if they were just inefficient and bumbling and wasting money, but it's got much, much worse than that. It's absolutely toxic, and it's absolutely undermining the very fabric of what it is that makes the Western world a place about peace, freedom and prosperity. That is at risk from this current education system at schools and at universities.
Hey, Bill, can I just go back to how you treat those people, you know, the protesters? And I think 95% of people would agree with the French policeman who, one of these people was glued to the road, and he just came along and just pulled their hand off. Pulled the hand off the road. You know, didn't worry about trying to ease it off. Now, I'm sure that if you did that quite a few times to these people, then they'd be very reluctant to glue themselves to anything. That's the first thing. The second thing is that discipline. Where's the discipline in our society? And discipline doesn't mean corporal punishment. Discipline means that there's a set of boundaries, and if you go beyond those boundaries, then you have to suffer the consequences. Unfortunately, some of the activists are sitting on the benches, so that when these people are brought before the magistrates or the judges, they get a slap on the wrist. There was that fool in Sydney who blocked the Sydney Harbour Tunnel in peak hour, so that tens of thousands of cars were delayed. People were, as you said before, delayed from going to hospital, and she got off. Now, you know, straight away you say, well, put them in the clink for 6 months, let them cool their heels there. So that's one of the issues. That's how we could start to turn that around.
But the other thing is too, if you write a comment that on that story, because it was a news article on in the Telegraph or something like that, and I wrote a comment, and it wasn't too, I didn't think it was so severe, but you know, maybe if she was let off on grounds of being affected mentally by climate change, well, then maybe the judge did have another option, you know, in the mental health service area, but that didn't get a Guernsey far as the comment field went. That was rejected. That's why on this particular podcast or this regional wrap, I've held my tongue as far as going a little bit more controversial in some of the comments that I'd make to people like Rafe, you know, when we're sitting around having a coffee. Yeah, well, that's pretty normal. But the trouble is, I think it's become a bit of a problem in regards to people now can't express what they really feel to a broader audience without being, you know, like you've got to be careful of, you know, what the repercussions are, because, you know, the easily offended can have avenues to, you know, through either the human rights or something like that to take action. And some of it's quite vexatious. I mean, there's a lot of vexatious claims are made, especially to the Human Rights Commission and to the courts. So it is a problem for everyone, I think.
Well, Bill, there's a classic example tonight here where it's trial by media. You know, it used to be the presumption of innocence. An allegation's made in the media now, and people are found guilty before it goes before a court of law. I mean, this is something, and there was a lawyer who, there was the AFL inquiry in Victoria, and some of the witnesses said that they didn't want to go there, so he then turned around and made a statement that they weren't going to appear before the AFL inquiry because of cultural issues. Now you say to yourself, okay, if you're going to have an inquiry, you come up with a decision one way or the other based on the evidence that people give to the inquiry. But if one party doesn't want to give evidence, then it's left up in the air. Like, where's the truth?
I suppose the other thing we wanted to do is move on in regards to it's quite obviously, or it's becoming apparent now to the wider public, that there is going to be costs involved. I mean, I think while the conversation was about climate change and renewables and it's got to be a bright future and it had an impact on the hip pocket yet, most people sort of, well, even when they went to the ballot box, they didn't give it a big lot of thought other than, oh, idealistically, that should be good, so I might vote for it, you know, vote for someone who's pushing that. But now as we move on and the reality is coming into people's daily lives, into the economics of the day, into their household budgets, do you think there's now the room there for awakening the general public more to the consequences of what, you know, they've been apathetic about, but still supporting.
Aha, you've hit the nail again. I've been saying for some time, having given up on the climate debate, that we'll get a hearing when things start to turn bad in the energy space. And I thought the first signs of trouble would be serious blackouts, but it hasn't quite been that. It's been the price, and that's good because the price affects everyone. Blackouts could have been shared around and rationed out so that it could have been put under the rug a bit, but price is going to hit everybody. So I keep telling my colleagues in the energy realist movement that our hour has come. We can now speak to the condition of the people. We can speak to their worries and concerns in a way that we never could when we were trying to have a climate debate. So we can talk to them about things that they care about using language that they can understand. We can explain the problem with wind droughts. We can explain that there's no grid scale storage. We can explain that there has to be a seamless delivery of power. You can't have gaps. We can explain that we don't have nuclear power and we don't have extension cord to other countries like they do in Europe and the US states. So we've got the wind in our sails if we can just get the message out to people in the middle ground who haven't locked onto some form of green fanaticism. So we've got a golden opportunity, and we're going to make the most of it. And thanks for having me on to tell people about it.
Yeah, can I add to that, Rafe? It's the cost of living now that's in everyone's mind. Now, the cost of energy is an input into not only, well, everything in our everyday lives. So the cost of energy at supermarkets, the cost of energy is significant because they've got refrigerators. So when they're paying more to keep the food cool or keep the food on ice, then the price of the food goes up because they've got to recover that. So the cost of energy feeds right through the whole of our society. And this is something that people are going to start to feel, you know, that pain in the hip pocket, you know, with inflation. And what's driving inflation? The cost of energy. So as inflation goes up, the bank then puts up the mortgage rate, so you're paying more on your mortgage. So this is an upward effect because of the cost of energy, because of the stupidity of governments. Now, just one final thing. I do a bit of work for some clubs, and I did an analysis of their energy bills. They could reduce their energy bills by 14% overnight by not having to pay environmental subsidies. So they pay environmental subsidies that are then paid to these wind farms and solar farms to make them viable. So straight away, you could get 14% off your bill by saying, we're not going to pay environmental subsidies anymore.
Okay, just on another factor there, if you go back in the times when I was a happy little child skipping around, oblivious to the world things and that, the CPI used to run, you know, at a very shallow pace, you know, on a graph, and electricity and the general CPI were quite locked together. And this stayed in effect right up until about 2007, although the CPI did continually rise through the 80s and 90s. But the energy costs and the general CPI were pretty well toe to toe. But 2007, they separated, and noticeably, soon as Rudd came in with renewable energy targets and that, the cost of energy started rising much more rapidly than the general CPI, and that continued through the Rudd-Gillard government. It plateaued a bit during Abbott's time as he tried to wind back ARENA and other things, but then took off again with Turnbull and Morrison, and I suppose now it's just got to rocket apart, but drag the normal CPI up with it as well.
Oh, the worst case scenario there is very, very alarming. Just take the 20 to 40 billion that's been earmarked to upgrade the transmission infrastructure. And bear in mind, this is supposed to contribute to cheaper power. Well, all of that money is going to go straight through to taxpayers and consumers, either by funding the subsidy for the work or by adding on to the cost of the service component of your electricity bill. So big shocks are coming. And the question is whether enough public opinion can be mobilised and whether enough reasonable adults in the political rooms can take heed and just start thinking about sensible policy. But it won't happen under Chris Bowen. So I don't know where the Labor Party is going to turn.
Well, the other thing is that
there's probably no way that the Labor Party can change. I mean, they're locked onto that. It really needs we need to probably go through this next 2.5 years of pain, and then the realisation of what's happening, and then the informing of people. So when they get to the ballot box, they can vote for none of the above. You know, basically, we don't want anything to do with anyone who's pushing renewables and net zero, and maybe hopefully they'll just sweep aside the whole lot of people that are indoctrinated into this plan to make our energy more expensive.
You know, they closed Hazelwood down in Victoria, and the main reason for that, well, there are two problems with it. Hazelwood uses brown coal. Brown coal can't be sold anywhere else in the world. So the brown coal that they were using was able to be used as a resource to generate power. But then Daniel Andrews had the bright idea, well, what we'll do is double royalties, double the royalties on coal. So as soon as they double the royalties, then the whole the coal-fired power station down there became uneconomic. So the French owner said, we're going to close it down. Now, in his budget, he said we're going to get $87 million because we've upped the royalties. Subsequently, what happened? They got nothing, but then they had to pay the aluminium smelter in Portland to keep them operating of about $200 million. So instead of getting the 87, he's paid out $200 million. Now, you'd have to say the voters in Victoria, they must have the Stockholm syndrome. You know, they've been locked up for so long that they just, fall in line with this bloke. And the same with Queensland. I think Queensland, they just up the royalties on their coal. So that's why people are paying more. Well, it's one of the reasons why they're paying more on their electricity bills, because these governments, they're murdering money. So what do? They up the royalties, and then what do the coal companies say? We'll just close down, which I think BHP are doing in Queensland, aren't they?
Well, I think there's a bit of a problem in regards to some of these people involved in so-called energy, sort of setting themselves up to be in the new energy market as well. So whether they're kicking their own can down the road, looking in the direction of the new prosperity that's going to come via the taxpayer and the consumer delivering them money for nothing. Maybe that's their incentive to sort of get involved with that and sort of kick their own coal people.
Billy, it ain't going to happen, mate, because there's a tipping point. The cost of electricity is going to get to the point where people or businesses can't afford to pay it. So these people who invest in these wind farms and solar farms are going to find there's nobody to pay the cost of them or the interest.
If we could just look at the examples that we're seeing in Europe at the moment and how they will dawn on us very soon. We've already seen in Germany and England in regards to this latest batch of energy crisis. But unless you do a little bit of reading, you can also find a lot out about actually people going bankrupt and businesses closing. Well-established businesses have been around, 50, 60, 100 years or that, but now they're just getting to the point that it's the energy cost that it's actually going to send them broke. They can't afford to operate. They can't increase their charges to recover their costs, because bioresistance, it's like a lot of things. I mean, a lot of people don't understand bioresistance in regards to you'll buy something up to a point where its cost gets to no, I'll find a substitute or I'll go without.
Exactly.
And that's what's happened to in Europe in a lot of places, is this point has been reached for so many individuals and companies.
Well, mate, I love Smith's chips, but the price has doubled, so there's no way in the world I'm buying them anymore. That's one thing. The other thing in Europe,
that's good for your waistline.
That's right. But yeah, well, I won't stand up. But anyway, in Europe, what the governments over there did, they mothballed the coal-fired power stations and they mothballed the nuclear power stations, which they're reopening. The idiots in Australia have blown ours up.
You want to get in there, Rafe?
Well, I don't know how much additional cost energy intensive industries can stand. It's just going to be a very interesting scenario to see. I'm thinking of things like fast food shops, any kind of engineering plant, obviously the smelters, although I think the smelters tend to get special deals from government, as Bill pointed out. But one of the most intriguing questions at present is what is going to emerge regarding the new market that the Energy Security Board was supposed to be setting up. The Energy Security Board consists of different bureaucrats out of the energy industry, and they were supposed to report by the end of last month, or a preliminary report on a new market, which was probably going to include what they call capacity payments, which means paying people to have capacity available on standby to deal with shortage. But the state governments decided that they didn't like the idea of having coal and gas getting any kind of payment, so they more or less told the ESB to go away, we'll sort it out between us. But as I think Bill might have pointed out, and I've pointed out, our energy supply is balanced on a knife edge. We're at a turning point or the edge of a cliff. If we lose one more coal-fired power station, then chaos will ensue every time there's a windless night, because we've reached the point where we are right on the bare bones with our conventional power capacity to handle the highest points of demand. This is a unique situation. Up to this time, nobody needed to bother about whether the wind blew or the sun shone, because there's always enough conventional power there to do the job. Right now, we're a hair's breadth away from a situation where there is not enough conventional coal power and other conventional power to see us through a windless night. So just hold on.
I think the other thing is,
yeah.
Well, Rafe,
another thing that's happened, a lot of people don't realise too, is by minimising the amount of money that coal industry, the coal-fired generators can make, also causes impact on their maintenance and things like that. And the other problem is, because they're the whipping boys for the wind and solar, they're the ones who've got to run down their generators and run them up as the power fluctuates. That is not a good thing for coal-fired generators. It's not good for a steam turbine, and that's probably putting excessive wear and tear onto them. That's really requires additional maintenance. And we're seeing we've already had Clyde generator number 4 blew out about 6 months ago after, I'm not quite sure how hydrogen has got anything to do with a steam turbine, but it was a hydrogen explosion that caused the generator to really pop. And now we've just lost another one. We've lost unit 3. That's good. These things are going to take a while to get reorganised. And like you say, we've taken some of the older ones out, but they did provide scheduled servicing slots for these other people to do their job. But if there's not the volume of coal-fired generators around to work in that maintenance program, it's going to add another layer of problems to the whole system.
100%. Well, Bill, 48% of coal-fired generation in Australia is due to close by 2030. So what you're saying also is that's going to put pressure on the balance. First of all, you're not going to have enough power. But of course, the other thing is what the idiots are talking about is to put a cap on prices. So as soon as they put a cap on prices, these businesses turn around and say, well, hang on, you put a cap on the price, there's no point in us in continuing operating. So we'll just close the generators down. You know, it's that the point is that you get cheaper energy or get cheaper anything if you've got a significant supply of it. It's like bananas. If you've got a lot of bananas, you get the price at say $1.50 a kilo. If there's a wipeout of bananas, they cost you $5 a kilo. It's the same with power. If you've got plenty of power and it's being generated efficiently and effectively, the price is going to come down. I mean, we all know it, but the lunatics that are running the place, the lunatics who are running the asylum, they don't know it.
Well, there's one thing about Queensland that's sort of still on the book. Most of our generators are still fairly new. I mean, if you run through any of them, you've probably got at least, even the oldest one's probably still got 20 years in it, on the normal scale of things. And some of the newer ones have probably got another 40 years in them if they're maintained properly. The other thing is most of our coal generators are owned by the government in government bodies. They're still government enterprises sort of thing. So, and on top of that, we've got a reasonable amount of gas. So I think this state is probably the best positioned in regards to holding our assets for that much longer, even though we've got a government hell-bent on closing them down. But at least our assets are capable of generating more than we need for the foreseeable future. But I don't know if we can keep supplying New South Wales and Victoria with any extra in the future as well.
Yeah, but Billy, put security guards around your coal-fired power stations so that the government doesn't blow them up.
Yeah, look,
she wants to spend $68 billion to go to renewable energy and close down your coal-fired power stations. So listen, Queenslanders, you're the hope of the side. Do something for us. The rest of us are drowning.
yeah, well,
just if I could just go back on one subject we were talking about, but didn't sort of follow through with too much, is the $20 billion investment in the transmission system to cater for the renewables and that. That's really just a cost that's really only required because we're going to renewables. If we just stuck with a normal coal generators or fossil fuel generation system, we could keep our dumb or simple grid system. We don't need a smart grid system. I mean, you still need some management, but you don't need it to be as complex as it is with renewables. And also, you don't need it to be as sort of widely dispersed to all these corners of the states to hook up to these wind farms and solar farms. Because you only, in the normal system, I think you only used to rely on about a total of about 20 odd coal-fired power stations across eastern seaboard, and then subsidised by a bit of gas, and then of course the connector to Tasmania. But all this $20 billion is only required to be spent to facilitate this. It doesn't actually give the country any capacity, additional capacity, doesn't generate any wealth, and doesn't lower costs.
Well, yeah, but why are the taxpayers paying for it to connect up all these private companies? So why is the poor old taxpayer paying for it? And $20 billion, that's underestimated. There was a figure, I think, Rafe, wasn't the regulator talking about $85 billion?
Well, it might have been $20 of public money, and they think investors are going to come up with another. The private sector is supposed to kick in, but just taking up Bill Bates' point, 100% on the waste of this effort. As I've been pointing out, apropos of wind droughts, people like to think that the wind's always blowing somewhere. So if you build enough wind capacity, you build the transmission up so you cart that spare power from one place to another. But the whole point is that many of these wind droughts occur across the whole of the southeast of the continent. Basically, it's when a high pressure system comes drifting in from the west and sits there for a day or three. And it happens at not precisely like clockwork, but it happens often and frequently. So, but during those times, there's no spare power anywhere. So that particular rationale for this complete waste of money doesn't exist. And as Bill said, the rationale doesn't exist until you put dispersed, what they call dispersed generators that are wrecking the countryside. It is just madness at every level of analysis. The whole grid stability issue has come about by allowing intermittent energy sources to connect to a perfectly well-functioning grid that we had not that long ago.
All I need is one good hailstorm to go through central west New South Wales and you'll be reaching for the candles.
Just on that, in regards to, if we can talk about the scale of renewables that we'll need, I saw tonight on Credlin, Matt Canavan speaking with Peter Credlin in regards to there hasn't been a sort of assessment or evaluation in regards to the quantity and the cost of the total fit of renewables required to make us net zero. I find that sort of, well, most people would find that inconceivable, but then when you listen to other people in regards into Europe, and there's people now talking about the sheer volume of resources required to deliver net zero, that there may be not enough basic resources in the world. You would think someone somewhere in the government or the bureaucracy would have an instant figure in regards, we have to build so many gigawatts of wind farms, so many gigawatts of solar, they need to be dispersed here, they'll cost this much, they'll cover this much area. But it's obviously that no one has. So you want to just touch on that topic?
Not quite true, Bill. The AEMO, the Australian Energy Market Operator, has an elaborate plan with different scenarios, and they can tell you that we need. They can produce numbers of gigawatts of this and gigawatts of that, and 9 times as much storage. The problem is we don't have any storage right now, and there's no sign of any turning up. It is absolute fantasy, Bill, but they have put numbers on. People say, oh, maybe 200 billion or 500 billion. And then they talk about the world. They say, oh, maybe some number of trillions. But that's absolutely fantasy land. And we just have to look forward to a landing. And it's going to be a hard landing, but it's coming. But people put numbers on it, Bill. Don't you worry. There's plenty of numbers out there. They just don't make any sense.
Well, Chris Bowen said that they're going to need 22,000 solar panels a day between now and 2030. So it's easy. It rolls off the tongue. 22,000 solar panels a day. Good luck.
But what I'm saying is that general cost or scale isn't being disseminated widely enough to the general public to get them to realise the scale of things that happen. And the other thing is that's really annoying is the media. If you go back in history, the media fated itself as being the fourth estate that sort of kept the aristocrats and the government and the clergy all in line and sort of held them to account. Now they don't even do their basic job of, turning up to an interview and having some basic questions to ask people to get some relevant information that the public should need. They they just accept what they go there, listen, and then report it. They don't do any inquiries or anything that you would expect the fourth estate to do. And do you think that's one of the biggest failings that's going on? The sort of
that could be the biggest problem we've got. It absolutely could be the biggest problem. Nobody knows what they need to know. But as Bill will tell you, this is where the National Information Network comes in, that we want to roll out to get around the incompetence and malice of the media and get to people some other way. It's a challenging task, but we're up for it. But you're quite right, the media, if some decent line of mass circulation newspapers turned up and started telling the truth about these things, we could start having a decent conversation like next week, but we can't at present.
Well, look, I'll give you a simple example of a lady who's a farmer outside Wagga Wagga. And she's had this solar farm built beside her property. Now, the solar farm is not maintained. When they built it, they brought in all the weeds. It's not maintained, the weeds grow, and the seeds from the weeds are then blown onto her cropping property. So she's got to spend money to get rid of the weeds so she can grow a crop. Now, these are simple things that you just don't hear about in the media, but these are the sort of things that are happening to people in the country. And that's why we've got to support them. That's why we want the truth to be out there to the people in the cities. One of the ideas I came up with was to record some wind turbines, the noise they make, and then drive through the suburbs of Sydney early in the morning with these loudspeakers with the wind farm noise blowing to all the people in the city. And then they might start waking up.
Oh, good one.
Actually, that might be good to come and get rid of some of the bats in the country towns where we've been infested by those things.
Yeah, good luck with that.
And we're only infested by those things because people in Brisbane reckon, well, you shouldn't interfere with them and all that sort of stuff. Whereas years ago, people used to just get out the shotgun and just send them on their way, sort of thing. So they didn't, but we can't do that now because someone in Brisbane is made them sort of, and Canberra's made them protected and all that sort of stuff.
Don't they pollinate the fruit trees?
Yeah, but not in the city, middle of your city.
That's why they're putting out the wind turbines.
If we just, we wish. If we just sort of move on now to the scale of some of these things. Now, in Cairns, we've had a situation in the past where there was a lot of support. Well, I think we had a preliminary test site for a wind farm. I think it only had 20 odd turbines, and they were only a megawatt each. So they're little babies. I think they're pretty well heading for the dump now. But then the first actually installation was Mount Emerald. And I think that's about 38 or something turbines, about 3 megawatts apiece. And all the people of Cairns, as far as the green people and the environment, all cheered. Now, that was fine, but now we've got the situation we're actually putting in our second wind farm within, on the tablelands. It's only 28. It's only 28 turbines at Caban. They're about 3.7 megawatts capacity turbines, and they've cleared a lot of wooded ground, I'd say. Whereas Mount Emerald was on established farmland, and it wasn't such a big environmental issue. But now we've moved on to the project of Chilumban, which is going to be 95 turbines, bigger again. The roads cut through to facilitate to the actual installation sites of the turbine are about 70 metres across, access roads. There's probably somewhere nearing 100 kilometres of access roads and patching and stuff like that through land that was basically saved by the environmentalists years ago They basically put the timber industry out, put hundreds of loggers and workers out of employment, closed down sawmills to save this thing. And now I think it's sort of ironic that in one foul swoop, all the things that they saved is just swept aside by a government that sort of says, well, no, well, we knew renewable energy is, has a priority. So no, all your efforts to save this thing is redundant. So
That's exactly right.
You see that being another thing to fuel the fire for your education program.
Well, that's why I've written a paper, The Dark Side of Renewable Energy. And I've seen the video, and it's beside the World Heritage Area. Right next to it's World Heritage Area. And these are pristine.
Yeah, but that's where the transmission line is.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. Look, just one thing. There's a documentary called The Planet of the Humans. Have you seen that?
Not offhand.
Michael Moore, The Planet of the Humans. You can go onto YouTube. It's about an hour and a half. If people want to know what's behind the renewable energy industry, it's money. It's all about the money. Not anything to do with energy. It's all about the money. The Planet of the Humans.
If you send us any of those links to myself, I'll put them up with the show so people can go to the websites, both of your organisation and to those sort of programs. So just send me the links and I'll put those up for you.
Yeah, you can get Bill's paper off a link off our website. And there's two really great 5-minute videos by a guy called Mark Mills. 2 5-minute videos. They tell you practically all you need to know about the waste and the ruination and the non-feasibility of that green transition. So look, thanks for the opportunity to come on the show, Bill. It's been a wonderful opportunity, and we'll certainly send you some good links through.
Okay, then, just before you run away a bit, if we can just sort of maybe classify the people you're going to try to engage in the first instance, and do you see any notable people that you can sort of maybe target as well besides the general public?
Well, our basic target is ordinary people that haven't become locked into obsession with global warming and renewable energy. Just all the reasonable people around the place. It would be immensely helpful to find opinion leaders in this, people who have a charisma and a profile, like maybe like a Test cricket captain or a female netball player.
He's in the global warming bandwagon, mate.
But we could certainly use some of those folk. In the meantime, we're just looking for every independent broadcaster and podcaster that we can find to extend our reach.
Well, Bill, the point is, as you said before, about the fourth estate. These people before who used to question, they just follow, somebody gives them a media grab and they just, use the media grab. They become very lazy. And also, they said that, this sort of news doesn't sell. But when it starts hurting people, and it is hurting people, it's the people who can't put the heaters on in winter. The people who can't afford to pay their energy bills. The politicians drive around in the electric cars that are paid for by the taxpayers. The politicians fly around in the aeroplanes and they're paid by the taxpayers. They get their food paid by the taxpayers. So it doesn't affect them. The only thing that affects them is when they get voted out. So that's what we've got to do. We've got to start to motivate people to understand that what's happening is destroying our country.
Yeah, mate.
Well, like I said, I think the hip pocket angle over the next 2 years is going to be one of the biggest influences for the acceptance of different ideas by the general public or different positions.
100%, 100%, and that's why I say that our hour has come. It's here.
Prevention's better than cure. I don't want to see people go broke.
Okay, gentlemen.
Just on the fourth estate, Bill, they stop being the fourth estate, they become a fifth column. The fifth column
Yeah,
is
well, I
subversive.
doubt if a lot of the people who are journalists today would even know about the fourth estate. Like, you know, it's something like I learned as a kid, and it was in part of our history lessons and that on Europe and things like that. But I don't know if it even comes into the mindset of the newspapers or the journalists that are there today. I don't even know if they understand the concept of what it is.
It's a block of land down the corner.
Okay, gentlemen, look, we'll leave it there. I'm sure we can come back and have another discussion in the future as the energy crisis bites, as the prices bite. And I think probably one of the saddest things will be, we'll probably come back and we'll have a talk about the number of businesses that are closed down over the period of time as the prices skyrocket. They're talking 35% in the next 12 months, another 50% in 12 months after. I don't know what normal businesses can tolerate that, especially hospitality industry. If you've got even if you've got a pub or a club or like you say, a takeaway outlet, let alone a major business, and maybe even the banks will start hurting because they'll have to pay for the electricity for their buildings and their computing, and that might actually say, oh, maybe we should fund coal-fired coal projects in the future.
Mate, what's going to hurt them even more is when people can't pay their mortgages.
Well, I think that might be on the cards fairly shortly, but not just on the energy prices. I think there's a lot of other things coming to a head at once.
Well,
if you could just stay on the line, you're welcome. If you just stay on the line, we'll have a quick chat later, but I'll just introduce next week's show. If you enjoyed tonight's show, please like, follow, and subscribe to our Facebook page, and also subscribe to our YouTube channel. Now, next week, I'll have Associate Professor Stephen Nickelwaite on. Now, he's from the Sustainable Resources Institute at the University of Queensland, and we'll be discussing the resources required for the new economy, where Queensland fits in the old energy economy, and how well it's positioned for the next energy economy that they're hoping for, in regards to the rare earths and the other products required for renewable manufacture, and also the processing. So join me next week, and we'll have a discussion. We'll have a discussion with Associate Professor Stephen Nickelwaite of the Queensland University. Thank you.